Last year at St. Pete, I saw the Be the One tent, and I went up and I shared my story with them, and I just said, hey, what you guys are doing matters in destigmatizing mental health, right? So in sharing my story, it upset a lot of people, right? To hear that I went through that. I got a lot of raw emotion out of people, which made me feel good because it was a genuine care. These people actually cared about me, and they didn't know me, right? Like, I didn't even show them my ID card. They took on faith that my story was accurate and I am who I said I was. So I got a lot of hugs from people. I got introduced to a lot of people. I got post recommendations because I joined at the tent at the race. I said, this is something that maybe just financially I want to support. You know, it will loop back to post involvement maybe sometime after I come back from Europe. But I was like, this American Legion, this Be the One campaign, this is something I want to contribute to and help because I see the value in the mission. The more we talk about mental health, the more acceptable it is to deal with it, right? So if you have these campaigns like Be the One that say, hey, you're not alone, you can fix it, right? But the more we talk about it, the more people like me feel comfortable reaching out. And so after I was exposed to Be the One after I was already seeking mental health, but I credit campaigns like Be the One for making me feel okay to do it. And I didn't make that decision on a whim. I probably sat around the racetrack for like an hour, thinking, like, should I go tell them? Like, yeah, I think it's important that they get the feedback. So that's kind of my journey with my mental health and kind of what brought me to today. And I joined the Navy in 2006. Where I grew up in Florida, I was underneath the traffic pattern for what became the first Space Force base, but at the time it was an Air Force base. Yeah, so I spent 6.5 years at sea across 8 deployments, 10 different ships, I think 8 different classes of ships, 7, 8 different classes of ships. If the Navy is relevant and in the news, I want to be there. So then the Navy will rotate between deployable and non-deployable commands. But by choice, I've only done 2 years and 18 years at a non-deployable command. I like to stay tip of the spear, so to speak. It's hard to be away, but I've kind of conditioned myself to be, that's what my job is, right? So I'm kind of used to it. Also, it appeals to my sense of adventure. So the Navy's actually taken me across every line of longitude on Earth. Like, I've been around the world at different stages due to the Navy. Spent 2.5 years at sea. That was 3 deployments. The 3rd deployment was extended from 6 months to 8 months, right? So just a lot of bad news, a lot of time away from home, not really doing the job that I signed up to do and having a hard time chasing my goals. So I went through a rough patch. I spent a lot of time sleeping in my car because I didn't have a place to stay off the ship when we were in Port San Diego. And that kind of dragged me down. So in 2009, I was security on the pier, and I had a shotgun and a 9mm, and we worked the night shift. So in the middle of the night, I was in a porta potty on the pier, and I was having a really tough time. And I pulled out the pistol, and I played it out in my head, what happens if I shoot myself tonight? And I was ready to do it. And it was a spur of the moment thing. Like, I hadn't planned this out. I was just in a really tough spot. So I thought about it. If I pull the trigger now, does anyone hear it? If they do, are they going to find me? When are they going to find me? Because I'm sure they'll find me. And then I thought about them going onto the ship into my rack where I sleep, cutting the locks off and taking all my things, putting them in a box and sending them to my parents. And that made me pretty sad. So I survived the night on that thought. And then I had a better day after that. So I kind of survived. But that was my first exposure, you know, kind of getting to the limit on what I could bear. And then I PCS'd to Guam. And that was a lot of fun, so things got better, right? But I noticed it was about once a tour, I would kind of relapse into a poor mental state. I never got as close as I did in 2009, but it would affect my personal relationships, my professional relationships, my professional performance, and not being able to deal with my own problems. Yeah, back in 2009, just my experience, and keep in mind, I was a very small part of the machine, right? But where I existed in it, nobody talked about their problems. And if you did, you're instantly labeled weak right? Like, you've got these issues that you can't handle, something's wrong with you. Because I got problems too, and I'm doing just fine. When in reality, you're not, right? Like, you're affecting your family, you're not fine, right? But we didn't talk about it back then. And part of it for me was I kind of grew up, I think, just at the right time, to where in 2019 or so, when I started going to behavioral health at Pax River, I was kind of an older guy, so I started to see things a little bit differently, a little more maturely, less emotionally, right? But let's just take my unit. So on the ship, I was very obviously struggling. They were pretty aggressive with me, my chain of command, and saying, hey, you're broke. You gotta get fixed, right? Being an aviation unit, they reference aircraft and they said, hey, when the plane's broken, you get a maintainer to go out there and fix it, right? Like, I'm not a psychologist, so I can't fix you, but you need to talk to the people that can. And I wasn't quite ready to dive headfirst into it then. I was still trying to mask some of my issues, but I got exposure to the process, right? So then when I came here to Jacksonville, I said, hey, all right, priorities changed. This is now becoming my priority. And like I said, once I put my hand up here in Jacksonville and said, hey, I need to talk to some people, they were more than willing to accommodate, and it didn't affect my job. I was on that deployment. They still trusted me to do my job, right? So the attitude has changed within the military. Unfortunately, I think it took a lot of suicides to get to that point, because a lot of that was driven from Washington downstream, right? So, hey, this is something we need to address, but it's working. I think we have a long way to go. I think suicide's still an issue in the active military. But from my experience, the Navy in 2009 is not the same Navy that exists in 2024. I've been on aircraft carriers before. My first command was an aircraft carrier, and I just deployed on another aircraft carrier. And we had social workers, we had therapists, we had a ton of resources on the carrier that I've never seen on a carrier before. We even brought a dog. We had a dog on the boat. So it was kind of like a service dog, but you can go pet the dog and stuff like that. So the Navy has taken it more seriously. And I hope there's still progress to be had. Like, we're not done. But we've made a lot of huge improvements there. So I've reached out to a lot of people that I see struggling. There's a lot of nights on deployment where I would be hugging a fellow sailor who was going through some stuff, and I was their ear, and I would say, hey, you got these resources, don't be afraid to use them. And I would hear the same excuses I had as to why you shouldn't, right? So I dealt with my problems as an adult pretty much my entire adult life. It culminated back in 2009 in San Diego, but I suffered in silence, right, until very recently did I give an honest attempt to try to get to the bottom of it and recognize it for what it is. And that's one thing I try to tell the people that work for me is I say, hey, look, don't be me. Don't wake up, realize you're 36, and you haven't fixed it, There's so much life out there to gain if you can get your head straight. I say this to the people that I'm exposed to, and I think it's worth hearing. If you are going through something that you're having a hard time dealing with, do not be the one to decide how severe it is, right? Like, don't wait until you're in the bathroom with a knife to ask for help, because at that point it might be too late. If you're having problems that you're having a hard time dealing with, you don't understand, you may not even know that you're having these issues, right? Like, if you're having a series of bad days, go talk to somebody. The resources are there. If you're not getting the support at work or at home, then those people aren't right for you. And in certain professional environments, right, there's a process you can go down to kind of address the lack of support. So don't let, if you think that going and talking to somebody will affect your future, it's a 50-50 on whether it does, right? But if you don't go talk to somebody, there's a 100% chance that your future will be negatively impacted or non-existent.